Everybody, welcome back to Taps in Patience. This is the 58th episode for the second time. We skipped 57, so we're doing 58 twice to make up for that. I don't know how we went from 56 to 58, but it was my fault. I am AJ with Design the Everything, here with Harrison of Precision Ingenuity. How you doing, Harrison?
I'm a recovering machinist.
Maybe a recovering business owner might be a
that could be
better phrase at this point.
That's true. I'm tired, but I'm happy and I'm recovering and I'm doing much better right now than I was at the same time last week.
I'm gonna go with same. I think both of us had a very busy, very stressful last 2 weeks or so, which is I think why we missed a couple episodes in here.
Yeah. It's been pardon my French, but I referred to last week as my hell week. So it was just that. My short days were 14 hours. My long days were around 20.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, you needed some time off this week.
Yeah, we're planning on potentially taking Friday off.
Nice.
So this week has been mostly just cleaning
stuff up. Work a 100-hour week and now you get a day off.
Yeah. So we'll see.
Welcome to owning a small business.
But, I've been praying and working towards that moment though. So it was one of those things where even though it was hell week, I was smiling the whole time and I was counting my blessings. It's one of those things where, man, it is stressful in the moment, but I kind of thrive under stress in some cases. And it was a lot to push, and I definitely got stretched in a lot of ways, but at the end of the day, when I saw all the parts lined up and it was a lot, I was very happy and proud and thankful for the opportunity to get all that done.
Yeah. And okay, so you called it Hell Week. How much of that was just like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of work to do, versus how much was we're trying to do this thing and it's not working?
Honestly, there was very little problems that I ran into with any of the machining that I did. Actually, the biggest problems I ran into was on the mini mill at the university. And the reason for that is because there was 6 parts I had to machine, and I machined them out of a chunk of stainless that was 2-inch by 3-inch by 6-inch.
Mm-hmm.
And it was probably somewhere in the neighborhood of a 75% material removal. And so basically the part, if you want to kind of imagine the part, it was an L and an L attached together. So it was an L shape, and then the small part of the L had another little part of an L that came up.
Okay.
And so basically it took up like 3 or the 4 of the, like all the edges of the part were kind of taken up in the material, but there was that huge area in the middle that had to get eaten away.
Yep.
And the problem that I ran into had nothing to do with the mini mill specifically, and had everything due to me trying to take the machining time down from, I think when I started, I was using the standard feeds and speeds for my Tormach, and it was somewhere in the neighborhood of an hour and a half for Op 1. And I got it down to about 30 minutes, and I had more room to push it, but I was running into the problems of pulling parts out of vices because I didn't have any serrated vices.
Yep.
The material was kind of wonky, and I started pulling my end mills out of ER collets.
Ooh, interesting.
And so I had material coming out of vices, and I had material coming out of vices, end mills coming out of ER collets, and my spindle load was only about 70% on a mini mill. So, or 60%. I think it was 60%. Was about 60 to 70 was about the highest I got it. And so like there was definitely room on the table to push it more. But I'm going to have to get used to having more horsepower at my disposal, and work holding and tool clamping are issues that I haven't really had to fight, that as I get into the higher horsepower brackets are things that I'm going to need to pay attention more to.
Yeah. that kind of makes sense.
So, and it was just frustrating because I didn't break any parts. I didn't scrap any parts, but I broke a few end mills and I threw a few parts in the machine. They didn't like fly out anywhere. They just kind of popped off the vise. And thankfully, it was in the roughing phase of every time a tool broke, it was in the roughing stage. Nothing was finished. And so everything cleaned up that I ended up like scratching up, and all the stuff that ended up going wrong happened on op 1. So I did a lot of learning.
Yeah.
But no, it was good. And so that's just kind of, it's giving me a little bit more healthy respect for the higher power machines, even though a mini mill is probably on the lower end of what most machine shops would consider a high powered machine.
I mean, compared to a Tormach, let's see, are mini mills, are they 7.5 horse?
They are.
Okay. I mean, Tormachs are technically, I believe, arguably 1.75 horse. And in reality, they're not quite that.
They claim 2 horse,
Okay.
but going by speeds and feeds calculators, I haven't gotten any of them to be over 1.5 horse and
Yeah.
actually run at that. Now, I have talked to other people, and they say sometimes you get a machine that can do like 2.5 horse, and sometimes you get a machine that can do like 1 horse. And I guess I don't know if it's motor quality, if it's VFD quality. I don't know the specifics, but it sounds like sometimes you can get a lemon and sometimes you can get a cherry, and I'm not sure what dictates that. So
Anyway, the mini mill still has multiples of the horsepower
yes,
that the whatchamacallit does.
the
Yeah.
Tormach, yeah,
The Tormach. Thank you.
yeah, yeah. No, so it was fun. I'm definitely in love, and can't wait till I get to a bigger machine because the part that I did that was massive for us is a tiny part
Mm-hmm.
by the in the grand scheme of things. So, um, but anyway, so had that. I hate probes and I love probes.
I'm with you there.
Had my biggest struggle and time loss had to come from probes overall. I can't run my business without them now and make amazing parts, but I can't get them to work. So, yeah,
Consistently. You can get them to
consistently.
work, but not work
Yeah,
consistently.
yes. And so I thought we had that fixed. We talked to the guy at Zoom Speed, and honestly, all last week, the second half of the week, if we had probe problems, this is a God thing. This is a God thing that the reason that we were able to get through those parts and the probe didn't have an issue. He sent us a new board, and I put it in
Okay.
there, and it didn't have issues for 1 week.
Interesting.
And so the new board fixed all of my problems
For a week.
until this week. And now they're all back on the new board.
Interesting. I
And
wonder if
so
something's degrading in the coolant.
I don't know. The new board, it had some coolant. It didn't get as much coolant as the old board. I did end up doing 2 things which helped, but I'm still having issues. I changed out the wires in my probe because you have to solder in new wires to connect it to the Zoom Speed board. We taken the board in and out so many times, and it's a really tight fit in there that we had actually, I think, created a short in the old cables. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if that constant on-off flickering as it's making connection and breaking connections was causing the board to freak out and crash. But I changed out those cables, and then the other thing I did was I washed the board, or I didn't wash the board down, but I wiped the board down as much as I could, and then I stuck it in my hotshot oven at like 200 degrees for
Yeah, you did a
like,
reflow.
well, not a reflow, because I kept it lower than reflow temperatures.
Okay.
I stuck it in there just enough to try to evaporate any water that might have gotten stuck under any components.
Did you wash it off with water?
I did not.
Oh, okay, good. You made it sound like that. You
No, no, no,
you
no.
used
I
alcohol, I assume.
no, I just wiped it down by hand. I
Oh,
probably
okay.
should have used alcohol, but I didn't want to use any liquid. I just took a clean rag and just kind of tried to get as much of it as I could. There could be some coolant residue left on the thing, and so I might need some like electronic cleaner to spray it down. But I'm probably going to need to do that anyways because it sounds like I'm still having issues. Short story.
I I may be misremembering this, but I believe circuit boards are immersion safe in isopropyl alcohol. Maybe do some Googling before you confirm that. But I believe that's what they do anyway to clean off the flux after soldering it.
It could be.
And that would take care of the coolant.
And
I don't, you probably don't know who Wes Swain is, but some of our listeners do because he knows everybody. But I think I remember him talking about like restoring old N64s or something, or anyway, I remember him talking about using isopropyl alcohol to clean off old electronics and that helping save them. So
yeah, but I had a good long talk with the guy on Zoom Speed, which I found out I don't have international phone plans on my phone, so
oh
that
no.
was that was a nice text message saying that I owed a decent amount of money for a phone call.
Whoops.
Well, in my defense, I was on Wi-Fi calling, so I didn't think they would charge me for
No.
Wi-Fi calling. That's so dumb.
Yeah.
Anyways, stupid
Next time do
AT&T.
a Zoom call.
Yeah, yeah. Anyways, regardless of that, I talked to the guy for about 30 minutes to an hour and basically gave him a whole lot of pointers for how he could change up his design. And he was really receptive to it and appreciative. And it sounds like, one, he doesn't ever use a probe with coolant. He doesn't have coolant set up on his machine. And he might not get too much feedback from people that do have coolant, or like my scenario and the amount of coolant that I'm flowing through my machine is definitely on the upper extreme end of Tormach users.
And I don't think he sells that many of those.
He might not. I don't know. But one thing that I suggested that I really hope he does is it sounds like it would be pretty easy to do because it sounds like his model's parametric. But I told him he needed to fit it in the BT style machines. The lid of the box has to be pointing up. And so I said, because it's got an offset where the hole's at, if you offset it the opposite direction, and stuck it upside down and had the lid facing down, water wouldn't pool into it. One, you would have a complete top surface that water couldn't get into. And two, if it came in the bottom, it couldn't pool and collect because it drained right back out. And so while you could still theoretically could get mist in there, you wouldn't have any water pooling and collecting and growing over time. Because I
So
think
I,
that's
sorry.
the real killer of it.
I had some probe woes. These probably didn't make it onto Instagram because I just kind of went, well, I'm not dealing with this, and then moved on. So actually, this is kind of Tormach plus probe woes. After we wired in the Haas machine, which is a whole another thing we need to talk about. We wired in the Haas machine. That involves shutting off power to the shop for a bit. And when I turned the Tormach back on and started getting set up for something, I turned it on. I went to change. I think I was changing to the probe. I may have not even been going to the probe. I may have just been going to some other tool. But anyway, did a tool change, and I started the tool change. I walked away. I came back, and my wireless probe and another tool were both lying on the table. And so somehow the ATC screwed up, which it does for me more often than not. With when after I restart it, I should know better than to let that thing do a tool change without me paying attention to it after I reboot it, because it almost always fails the first tool change.
Really?
And this time it just happened to drop my Drutronics probe, which was finally kind of working reliably. And I didn't think of anything of it at the time. I went back later. I probed in a part. I hit cycle start. The tool crashed into the material. I looked at the probe again, and the probe tip was way off center. So I went shoot, and I went back to start dialing it in. And no matter how much dialing in I did, I could not get it back on center. So I damaged something in there. And that is when I went, I am done with this probe. I put it in a box, and I haven't looked at it since. I imagine it's repairable if I open it up. Maybe I have to get a new stylus. Maybe that's bent or something. But so I went back to my Tormach probe, And then the first thing I did with the Tormach probe was after I got it all, I put in the new stylus, and I got the run out all dialed in. I went through all the calibration stuff, and then I immediately jogged to the probe into my part. Just a straight Z down. I thought I was going to be moving in X, but I moved in Z and just crunched the new probe tip immediately after getting it set up again. And naturally, that was my last probe tip for the Tormach probe. But fortunately, I have my defunct Renishaw probe that has the same tip to it.
I think it's an M4.
Yeah, it's like an M4. My Drutronics is an M3, I believe. So they're not compatible. And so I put the Renishaw tip back on there and started to get that dialed in and stripped a screw, one of those set screws. Now I need to order a new set screw for that probe. And that probe's been down. And I was like, you know what? I am done with probes for the day. So I grabbed some shim stock and I used just like the side of the end mill and the shim stock to set my zero, and
ran my goodness.
So well, I need to get that
edge
fixed.
finder.
So yeah, and then so I should probably just go backwards and tell the full story of the mill because I don't think we have. My Haas got here, OM2A, got it installed fairly smoothly. The only surprise was it showed up 3 days early. I got like a day or 2 days warning. Had to frantically go and find a forklift and got it all settled. Got it in here, got it wired up, got air hooked up. Overall, wasn't much weird with the machine. Besides the probe, there's two things actually. Besides the probe, the first weird thing that I noticed is every single pneumatic fitting was like finger tight. And I cannot explain why. I had to redo probably 30 different normal MPT fittings. I can't imagine how, unless it's been through like temperature shifts, or if they disassembled it for some reason and then just kind of finger tight put it back together. No clue. But I had to redo a bunch of those fittings. That was the first weird thing. And then I found out that the probe that shipped with it is not compatible with the receiver that the machine came with. So it's an old probe, but everything else, the receiver and the tool setter, are new. And after a day of playing with it and then finally talking to Renishaw says they just can't talk to each other. So I can either buy a used probe off of eBay for about $500, or I can send in my probe to Renishaw, and Renishaw will send me back a brand new one for I think it's $1,250.
Yeah, which is it's a lot, but getting them new for reference is probably over $6,000.
Yeah, if it's something that and I want to be able to trust it, so maybe not go with the eBay one. But I'm gonna wait a little bit longer on that because that's a lot of money that I don't technically need to spend right now. It'd be really nice, but I can run without it. And so instead, I bought a $18 Mitutoyo edge finder, like the Wiggler style, off of Amazon. And I actually have found that thing is pretty darn repeatable. It's actually more repeatable than my Tormach probe. So I've been using that, and it hasn't caused me any issues so far. It's a little bit slower, obviously, and it's all the opposite of unattended. It's all attended, but I mean, if it's accurate, that's fine.
That's what matters.
Yeah. So that the machine. Other than that, the only other thing about the machine is the spindle was way out of tram, and I ran my first test parts and test part. It was basically just a piece of aluminum that I faced off and put some pockets into. And I noticed some like very obvious stepping on my facing pass. And I was only using a 1/4-inch end mill. And it turns out it was... So my indicator, when you put in a spindle, it swept about a 7-inch circle. all the standards that everybody uses are a 10-inch circle, but I couldn't do that
Hmm.
with my setup. So on my 7-inch circle, it was about 10 thou out of tram from one
Oh
side to
wow,
the other,
that is a lot.
which is just a huge amount. I suspect the old owners didn't notice or care because they only used teeny tiny tools. The
Probably.
tool table when I got it did not have a single tool bigger than a 16th of an inch, so I just don't think they noticed, or it got budged during shipping.
Yeah.
And I spent
Yeah.
like, go on.
Because when Tormach, or not with Tormach, when Haas ships their machines, usually they bolt the spindles down to the XY table.
Yeah,
And so if that came in not locked in any way,
it was on
although
a
it would
block
be
of wood.
okay. Well, then it should have been fine. I feel like,
Yeah, I don't know.
but yeah. Anyways, tram issue.
But then I trammed it, and I got it within 3/10 on my 7-inch circle, which is, I think, just barely better than the Haas spec because they have 5 thou on a 10-inch circle. Or, excuse me, 5/10 on a 10-inch circle is what their spec is. So, other than that, I haven't had any problems other than just like learning how to use the new machine. There was, go on,
Do you know what the rapids are on that machine?
500 inches per minute.
Okay.
The newer models are 700, but this one, according to the parameters, is 500. Oh! When I bought it, I was sold a 30K spindle machine. When it got here, it was a 40K spindle machine. So
Oh, really?
I have 10,000 more RPMs that I didn't know about.
Oh, that's cool.
I did not even realize 40K spindle machines existed, and apparently they only existed for a couple years.
That's kind of cool.
And yeah, so that's actually kind of nice because it's a good compromise between the 30K and the 50K, where I have more RPM, but I have a little bit more torque on the lower end than the 50K machines do. So
Yeah.
I'm actually very happy with that. And with the, as we have learned with the Tormox, you don't want to run at max RPM all the time.
Mm-mm.
And I think they recommend 20% below maximum most of the time.
Yeah.
And so I basically just treat the machine as if it has a 30K max RPM spindle, but I can actually run at 30K RPM continuously because that's 25% below max.
That's cool.
Um, so that was a pleasant little surprise.
Have you looked at a, I don't know, like a 1/16th or a 1/32nd inch tool in aluminum where basically RPM is your limiting factor to see how how fast you can push it, like in terms of like comparing it, like having those extra RPMs and seeing how fast you can actually machine with one of those?
Not in aluminum. I took my first zometry part, and naturally the first zometry part I took was like a 5-day lead time and in titanium. And I forgot that I was taking my wife to like a gardening conference over the weekend. So I actually only had a day to make the part,
Oh no.
which that was exciting. So the very first part I made on this machine was a zometry part out of titanium. And it had a bunch of slots that were 1/32nd inch.
Oh my.
So I can tell you in titanium, I can run that 1/32nd inch tool at about 20 inches a minute.
20 inches and a 1/3 with a 1/32nd tool?
Yeah.
What? In
And
titanium?
the finishes were beautiful.
No way.
Yeah. It worked super well.
That's insane.
I love this machine. The controller is a thing that I'm learning. It took me probably an hour and a half to figure out how to get it to run a program off of, well, let's just say a program larger than the memory. It only has 1 megabyte of memory on it,
Oh no.
but it has I think it's a 20 gig hard drive or 20. I don't think it's 20 megabytes. I don't know. It's a big enough hard drive that like I don't ever need to worry about program size on it. and it took me an hour and a half to figure out how to get it to run a program off of that hard drive. I spent a
Interesting.
while trying to get it to run off the hard drive. I spent a while trying to get it to run off of the USB. And eventually, when doing research, I found some practical machinist post, and it was like, you got to turn on this parameter, then it'll work. And I turned on that parameter, and then it'll let me drip feed from the hard drive.
Gotcha. There's
So,
there's there's a lot of really cool parameters if you start poking around in there of like options. Like I was doing that the other day on the mini mill at the school because home is in the corner. So this is the problem with the mini mills from Haas is G28 when it takes you to home goes to X0 Y0 Z0
okay.
and the door is offset. So
Oh,
where the way the spindle is, the spindle lines up with kind of the edge of the door, and X0 Y0 is underneath the umbrella, which is at the opposite end, and so it needs to be at like max X travels in the opposite direction, and that puts it basically centered in front of the door. And so I called my local Haas rep and was like, "Hey, can I change those parameters?" And he's like, "You cannot." He's like, "You can pay Haas money to get a second home position where you
yep.
can adjust it, but you can't." And so I was just like, "Okay, well, I can fix this programmatically." And so basically, I just add a line at the end of the program that tells it to go to an absolute G53 position where I want it to, and then I remove the G28 go home.
So my machine does go front center when it finishes a program, and I remember turning that on. I don't remember if it was a setting or if it was a like check, like I don't remember if it was a setting on the control or like a checkbox on my post processor. It might have been on the post.
It's probably on the post because that's what I ended up doing was I ended up turning off go home on the post, and I could probably edit it on the program what it considers home to be, or edit it in the post, which might be something that if I get my own machine and I start editing post processors, um, one thing I'd
It's
like
not
to do,
hard.
yeah, it's not hard. One thing I'd like to do is put an extra box at the bottom that says go to this location at end of program, and you can just type in the XY absolute position at end of program that you want it to go to.
That would be nice.
Because that's something that I have on the Tormach side that I've manually scripted. I've created a manual NC and I can tell it where I want it to go. But it'd be nice to take that one step further, build it into the post processor, and just have it in where it defaults to a specific location, and then I can tweak it left or right depending on what I actually want.
On my Tormach, I have a macro that is like go home, and the macro is stored in the macro folder. And at the end of my programs, I just call the go home macro, or
Gotcha.
actually, it's the front and center macro. But
Yeah, that's basically what I did. But I think having it in the post processor is going to be the most convenient
yeah,
place to have it and make it kind of, if you're wanting to adjust it, that's a great place to adjust it rather than adjusting it in the code.
yeah, that makes sense.
So, because for me and the on the Tormach specifically, I have two vices in the fourth axis in it right now, and depending on which vice, or if I want the fourth axis, vice one or vice two, centered in front of the user, depending on what they're doing, or if I'm using both vices, I'd like it centered between the two vices. And so, having the ability to adjust where it goes to at end of program is something that just makes it more convenient.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, what else?
I had something on the machine and now I've lost it.
Oh,
Oh, I remember.
go
So,
ahead.
one of my favorite parts about this machine is the door. The door is not just like a slidey door, like the Torbox is. It is actually an L shape, and it removes like that whole corner of the machine, and the
Hmm.
table moves like within probably a quarter inch of the front sheet metal.
Oh, really?
So what that means is like when you are standing there working on your table, like setting up something, it's like working on a workbench. It's not like reaching into the Tormach is. There's no gap there. And so it's actually a really ergonomic machine.
That's cool.
I really like that about the machine.
Yeah, because you can. Doesn't it also have like a little window door?
It does. It has a door in the door. And I think to this day, other than when I first got the machine and was playing with it, I have not opened that door in the door.
I don't think they have that on the new machines, do they?
I don't know.
I think they got rid of it, and I think it's probably
Because
because of
it's
that very
silly.
reason, because no one ever used it.
Yeah.
So,
I could see it being useful for automation. Oh, they don't
mm,
have the angly door anymore. It's just a traditional door too.
oh really? I thought it
Yeah.
was. I thought it was at least going off sidetracked already. Oh yeah, you're right. It is just a regular door now.
Why is the door open in every single one of Haas's? Oh yeah, there it is. Yep, normal door. No door and door.
Yeah, but they do have the convenience package on it now. It looks like, so you can actually have tool holders on it.
Yeah, that
And,
would be
and,
nice.
and yours has a an arm that goes way out and over for your console, right? It's not on the side of the machine like that.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. I
Can
don't know. I
that
really
whole
like the machine.
can that whole arm pivot?
Yes.
Oh, that's cool. So you can move
So
that controller way out of the way if you needed to.
yep. I have it almost at a 90-degree to the machine right now, just due to how my workbench is and how space is set up.
That's cool.
But I don't know. Learning real machine controllers over Pathpilot. But otherwise, I'm very happy with the machine. If I could snap my fingers and replace my Tormach with another one right now, I would. With the one maybe caveat of it might be handy occasionally to have the extra travels.
Yeah,
But I like this machine.
that's good. That's as you've gotten and played around with this machine, I've thought serious thoughts about because there's a lot of parts I make that are really small for customers that machine would be actually a really good fit for. So
I like it.
that's cool. Speaking of new machines, we've started working on financing for our new machine.
Ooh. So what
So
you getting?
so the plan is to get a Haas VF3 SSYT with the 5-axis trunnion.
I'm going to translate this for people.
Yes.
VF3 means it is the third smallest or third from the end. I'm doing a great job of translating this to English. It's the third smallest Haas traditional vertical mill. YT means it has an extended Y travel.
Mm-hmm.
Did you say SS?
SS.
SS means super speed, so it has a coarser pitch ball screw, which lets you get faster travels, and I also believe it has a fast or a bigger.
Spindle. Higher RPM
Does it have a?
spindle.
It doesn't have a higher RPM spindle. The servos on the ball screws, I believe, are also larger, so it can sling around that weight faster.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then a 5-axis trunnion means that it tilt part funny.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an add-on that turns it from a 3-axis to a 5-axis. So, and Haas is basically running a deal right now that's too good to pass up. It's almost 20% off the total machine cost. And
Which
I've been
is
looking,
substantial at this level of
yeah,
machine.
and I've been looking up at a whole bunch of used machines, and every used machine that I can find in a VF 3 or 4 configuration that has a 5-axis trunnion with it is within 5% of the cost of a new machine.
Yeah.
And oftentimes it's actually they're wanting more than what this one is. And I'm sure there's room I could play in there that I could probably go back and we could go back and forth and I could get that price down. That's just what they want to sell it for. Um, but it's so close that I can't imagine getting it for cheap enough that it would make it worth it, especially if I'm looking at a machine that's 6 or 7 years old versus a new one.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. That's worth it. I bet. I bet your discount on that machine costs more or is larger in value than the cost of the machine I just bought.
Times
It's
two.
double it.
Times two.
Uh, I'm
You
still
could buy.
disappointed you didn't go with the Herco that had the buy one get one free machine.
Yeah. I looked at that for a little bit. If I could have made it pencil out, I probably would have, but I don't know.
the machine wouldn't have fit in my shop anyway, so it's fine. But just the concept of buy one get one free is hilarious to me.
Yeah. So all that said, I'm excited and ready to go up, and it's going to be a huge expense
Yeah.
that I'm hoping that if this last month has anything to go off of, if I can, when I actually sit down and do the math, I only need to grow the business by what my goal was by 50% to cover it at minimum. And so my monthly goal or my weekly goal plus 50% for adding one machine, and we were already over my weekly goal with the two machines by up to 5x. For Hell Week was 5x my weekly goal.
Oh, that 1 week.
That 1 week was 5x of what my weekly goal has been. So it's 5 times the amount that we got done in 1 week. And so with that in mind, that's not going to be all the time. But the fact that I could produce 5 times the amount, now granted, I was basically working nonstop. So it was probably like 3 weeks worth of hours in 1 week.
Yeah.
That notwithstanding, if I did get any kind of robot automation, it would allow me to pump out a lot of parts in a very short amount of time with very few people. So I think a 50% increase, which we were already doing a 50% increase over working a normal 40-hour work week with me and Weston running full tilt, I could hit 50% of our goal and stay within 40 hours with the two machines we had. I'm probably way overcomplicated that, and I apologize, but a lot of numbers running through my head right now as I've been trying to make it all pencil out.
I don't think you'll have much of an issue, especially if you are having to turn down some work just because of size limitations or even just quantity limitations. Like,
Yeah.
hey, Mr. Best Customer, I can do more parts, I can do them better, I can do them faster,
Yeah.
and I can do larger ones. Like, that's a pretty good selling point to get some more work from them. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And what's funny is this work that just buried us from August till now, that was from that was 5 machines worth, and it was a small order.
yeah.
So, and after dropping off all the parts, I talked with them, and they have 5 more machines, potentially 6, that they're planning on getting done before the end of the year. So I could see
So you're gonna be busy.
I could see the exact same size batch, maybe even a little bit larger, that I would need to do by the end of the year. So
Are you gonna have your new shop before the end of the year?
we were just there before I got on the podcast, and we're in the process of doing demo right now and coming up with game
Oh,
plans for.
so is the person gone?
Yeah, he's gone.
Oh, you did. You should have led with that. Okay, I thought he was still there.
No, he's gone. He's gone as of not last Friday, but the Friday before. So it's
Okay,
been
well, that's
it's been
huge.
over a week. It's been over a week now that he's been finally fully out.
So you got full 100% access to the new shop, and then you got slammed with work, so you couldn't go there.
Exactly. Exactly. As soon as he got out, man, we basically didn't have times to do anything. It was crazy. But we're through that. We're focused in on the shop. With us getting a new machine, we got to get it ordered before the end of the month if we want to take advantage of the discount. Because Haas is ending that discount October 31st, I believe.
I bet if you talk to your sales guy,
So it's
it
not
might.
the sales guy can't do it. It comes from Haas corporate is for that discount. But he says it is common for Haas to extend that. It's a scare tactic to get people to buy it, which works, and they might continue it, but it's not a guarantee. And so even the Haas sales guy that I talked to, he's like, "Hey, I'm 90% sure that they're going to renew it for next month, but if they don't, I can't do anything." And so it's kind of one of those things where it's like I if I already know I'm going to get the machine, the only issue becomes storage until I can get into the new building.
Yeah, I I'm not saying that you should be calling the sales guy on his bluff, but like he also wants to put pressure on you to buy the machine. And
Yes, but I can tell you by following the website hard that the machines are dropping like flies now that we're getting close to the end of the month. They're starting like they're checking off the serial numbers, and I've seen 3 or 4 machines disappear from that list completely. And so even if he's talking out his butt, and even if that sale goes on for another month, my machine could disappear that I want if it sells out, and then there is no discount after that. These are pre-made machines that are sitting in storage, and that's why they're discounted. So Haas has already built the machines. They're ready. They're in inventory. Once they're gone, they're gone.
yeah, but if you say, "Hey, this was the deal that we were working on. I'm gonna walk I can't if you can't honor this deal anymore." Like you have buying power here. Like you have some negotiating power. Yes, this is what they want you to think.
Yeah,
And again, I'm
I
not saying call them on this if you don't have to, but
that's
if
the
you know
that's
it, if it did go away all of a sudden, you can be like, "Well, that Herco deal is looking really good."
yes and no. I mean, here's the deal. It's one of those things where if the deal ever did go away, there'll be other deals that are going to show
Yeah,
up. But I don't think there's ever I this is the only time I've ever seen a machine that has literally everything that I want. And so, hey, another deal could come along, but it might be missing 3 options that I really want. And so, it's one of those things where the stars have aligned. It's within the time frame we want. The deal's really good, and the only issue is that I don't have a building to stick it into, and I've already talked to Haas and my moving company, and I can probably get about 1 month extension on staying at the Haas factory, and then I can get
mm-hmm.
2 months at the storage facility all for free. So it doesn't cost
Okay.
me anything to store it for until the shop's ready. And
Except,
so
will you be making payments on that time?
yes, but I already have a huge chunk of cash set aside for that we just got done doing because of Hell Week.
Yeah. I mean, it's still money that you're spending that's not getting to you anything at the moment, but
It's money I'm spending that's not getting me anything other than it's buying me a machine that I want and saving my spot in line.
yeah. So, how much work do you have to do on the new shop?
We're trying to figure all that out. At a minimum, we have to tear down all of the old office, which is about 50% done.
Tear down is easy.
We got to insulate the building. My dad wants to rip the whole face off the front of it because there's an awning that a guy added it and it looks horrible. And he wants to rip all the sheet metal off and redo the front. And we want to, it's got a 2 garage doors, one in the front and one on the side. We want to remove that side garage door anyways because we want to turn that into office space. We want to have the offices run narrowly across the front instead of kind of this L shape into the shop because it kind of leaves an area that was not very useful for our application. And so that was going to need to get filled in with sheet metal anyways. And we might have an opportunity to add and remove doors and move stuff around. So it makes kind of a lot of sense to remove the whole front off the building. And we want to do that before we do anything else.
I was gonna say, can you do this after you get the shop up and running? Because that doesn't sound
No,
like it would
no,
interfere.
no, because it's going to be open to the elements during
Oh,
that process.
okay.
So you're not going to want to have any insulation. You're not going to want to have any wiring. You're not going to want to have anything because you're going to be pulling all the sheet metal off the building, and that's your protective layer to keep everything out of the shop. So people could walk in and run off with tools or parts or whatever while that's going on. So if we're going to do it, we got to do it before we add anything to the building.
Yeah.
So that's what we're trying to figure out there. We're going to try to come up with a master plan for how we want to lay it out, but we're probably going to do it in stages. We're probably going to end up with an empty shell and us just having a machine and our tables just out on the shop floor. And then we're going to come up with different stages that we're going to build everything out to.
Yeah, because winter is coming up here. I don't know how bad winters are for you, but you probably want to get as much enclosed. Do the outside stuff first, and then work on the inside stuff, and you can be nice and toasty inside while it's freezing and
Yeah.
nasty outside.
The roof has a couple leaks. They think it's just the roof cap. So I need to get those taken care of. The whole roof is nailed down, and the nails and the gaskets around the nails I don't trust. So we're probably going to pull all the nails out and replace them with screws with proper rubber grommets to try to help prevent leaks and bolt it down a little bit better. We're going to insulate the whole inside. We're going to redo all the electrical. We're going to add air. So I'm looking at a rotary screw compressor, which actually I listened to a Saunders podcast where he was talking about selling his.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually reached out to them and talked to them. And the price that I got back was within $500 of buying a new one.
Oh, really?
But it's a
Did you
different
tell him that?
brand. It's a different
Okay.
brand. And so I don't know what he paid for that one new. And so I don't want to, try to downplay it because I didn't actually research that brand. But from my local supplier and the brands that they hang on to, and with a full warranty and all that stuff, it was within $500.
What brand was his, and what one are you looking at?
You're gonna make me a liar, but I'm gonna see if I can figure this out again. Saunders brand, from what I understand, is like an Italian brand. FIAC.
Okay.
I've never heard of them
Say,
before.
I haven't heard of them either. I, I wonder how he ended up with that one.
I don't know. Apparently, it's very popular in Europe. It's not very popular in the States. It's called the New Silver 10. And if you look up their website, I couldn't find anything. Like, I couldn't find any photos on their website. Like, they had a link to it, but like when I went to the page, it was just like, check out our new silver air compressor line. And it like had like no information or pricing or anything that I could find on it. It's just like, okay. And then the brand that I'm looking at, it's not the Kaiser brand, but it's kind of a similar sounding one. Let me see if I can figure this out. Let's see here.
I used to work at a company that competed with Kaiser, and that's
Oh,
why I'm
really?
I'm kind of curious. Now, granted, they competed with a different division. I'm trying to remember the other big brands we competed with. There were a couple, but we made super high volume, low pressure compressors. We
Gotcha.
we maxed out at 15 psi, but we would do like 30,000 CFM, which is a lot of CFM. Or
Yeah.
I think the biggest one we did while I was there was I think 100,000 CFM. So it moves a lot of air.
Yeah. Let's see if this is it.
So
Yeah.
rotary.
Kaishan? Kaishan.
Okay, yeah, I'm not familiar with them. It sounds like Japanese or something.
Yeah, it kind of is. I have a family member who has a wood shop, and they just got a 30 horsepower version of this one, and it is so quiet. You can you could have your ear up to it and barely hear it. I think like it is ridiculously quiet, even for a rotary.
Yeah, does it have a inverter?
I don't think so. I think this is just three phase, runs straight three phase. So, but it has a dryer. So this one, so
That's
what I got,
good. Yeah.
the quote I got was within $500, and it was for a 10 horse, which is what Saunders is selling, with a 120-gallon tank and an air dryer.
Okay. Is it variable speed though? That's what I was asking when I said inverter.
Oh, sorry, I don't know about that because that's one thing I wanted to ask is if there's any way I could detune it because 10 horse is more than I need right now, but I'm on the fence between going between 10 horse and 7.5 horse, and they're less than $1,000 difference
Go
between the two.
bigger. You'll
Yeah, but
outgrow it fast.
yeah, but we're running off of a compressor, like a piston compressor. It's about to grenade, which is a whole nother story. It's a DeWalt that is constantly running and is super loud, but it's 11 CFM, 11 or 12 CFM, and a 5 horse, I want to say, is in the neighborhood of 20 to 25 CFM. A 7.5 horse was, I think, in the 30 to 40, and then a 10 horse was in the 40 to 50 range, something like that. CFM. And so I don't think we would need a 10 horse for a long time. And so the one thing I've thought about doing is going for a 5 horsepower if it was cheap enough. And then if we grow, get a 10 horse and keep the 5 as a backup. So we have two.
And there's something to be said for some redundancy, but I don't know. I would just get the 10 and be done with it.
Yeah. So we'll see. Still kind of playing around with that. If any of the listeners has any feedback on any of that, on what you have done or would recommend or have gone through, I would love to hear from you. So please reach out. So yeah, so got to figure out air, got to figure out electrical, plumbing, insulation. We're gonna do heat and air at some point, but probably not in the beginning. But we're gonna get it all insulated and prepared for that. Thankfully, with winter coming, as we found out with our current shop, we have AC in our current shop, and it got pretty cold around here for fall. It got down into like the low 50s, high 40s, and the AC was still kicking on
Yeah.
because we were running all of our machines. And so heat isn't going to be as big of a deal as cool. So,
Since I insulated the shop, I have realized how much stuff I have putting off heat. And it's almost been a detriment. And like today, I mean, it was probably, I don't know, 60 degrees out, and I turned on the air conditioner inside because between the compressor and machines, and actually right behind me is my wife's freeze dryer. That
mhm.
thing runs all the time. And that is enough down to like 20 or 30 degrees. It will heat at least this room by itself.
Oh wow.
And it's just because our shop is really well insulated now. So any little bit of heat stays in. But yeah, shops make heat.
Yeah. So so that's going to be what we're going to have to figure out. I know in the summer if I don't have air, I'm going to die.
Yeah, air
Cuz
is
it was
important.
cuz like we have our air set to shut off around 5 o'clock when we normally leave, and at like 5:15, if we're still there and we're like busy and we're working, it's like, man, it just all of a sudden jumped up to like 85 degrees.
Yeah.
Like, what's what's going on? So we're gonna have to have air because it'll get stupid hot in the shop without it. So yeah, but in the winter, at least, if it gets too hot, I can just roll up the doors
Yeah.
for a little bit. So yeah, just trying to figure out the shop and a new machine and kind of go to the next level. And I'm gonna try to find some more customers so I can get. I'd like to have 3 customers, and like I said, I have 1.5. I have my big customer, and then I have Zometry as my fallback. So it's kind of like having to. I haven't really done a whole lot with Zometry in a while. I'd like to get back on that again, but I'd also like to find a couple more local customers.
Yeah, you need to diversify your customer base a little bit because if you lost your biggest customer right now, well, at least once you buy the new machine, you might be in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah, yeah, and thankfully with the new customer, or with the customer that we have, so far they have been incredibly appreciative of the work that we've done. One of my students at local university apparently has a brother who works at that company, and he asked him if he had heard about us, and his brother hadn't, and I hadn't heard of his brother. But then that was around the time that Weston made a huge delivery within like a week or two of that conversation, and he came back and he's like, "Does Harrison work at that precision ingenuity company?" And my student was like, "Yeah," and he's like, "Well, they just dropped off a whole bunch of parts, and everyone is talking about them. They all love them." So we made
That's
a really
good.
good impression on a lot of parts, and it sounds like everyone was super impressed. And that's not a pat on my back. For the record, I'm not bragging about myself so much as talking about the quality that most machine shops around here hold. And if I can stomp all over them with a Tormach and a Haas, which would be a ST15 standard lathe, then that just shows that they're cutting a lot of corners to make their parts, and they're having quality control issues, and appearance issues. So if we can continue to do that at a good price, I imagine that they will give us as many parts as we can handle um, at this point. So
So I have a new addiction.
is it refreshing the Xometry
Yes,
page?
it's refreshing the Xometry page. It's like a slot machine. Chink, any new jobs? Chink, any new jobs?
Yeah.
And then like a new one comes up, and you're like, oh, this could be a good job, and then it's a boring job, and you're like, oh, and you, but
Yeah.
yeah, then you can just
Yeah.
refresh again.
Mm-hmm.
I've still only taken the one job. I put in a couple offers where I would do jobs for more money today.
Mm-hmm.
And they haven't answered any of them. There was one that I almost took, and I'm still kind of torn on whether I should or not. It was 2 nylon parts, fairly complicated, but not huge and not that many setups. I think they were 3 setups, but they had a ton of features on them. It was like $200 in parts, and it was almost $1,600 in pay. But they were due on the 27th, which is the day after tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I was like, I mean, I could probably technically do these, but like if anything goes wrong, I'm not going to make it.
Yeah.
And I put in, I was like, okay, I'll do it for $2,000. And they didn't answer in time. And then I passed my next day delivery McMaster window. And it's like, well, now it's impossible for me to do these.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of like, man, that would have been, $1,200 for a day's work. I'll take that.
Yeah.
It did not. It did not happen.
You can sometimes find some really good deals on Xometry, and to be fair, what I can do with them and whatnot, their prices are significantly better than what I initially gave them credit for. And I don't know if their prices have just increased or the fact that I have more tooling and capabilities
makes it more worth it.
So, but we definitely want to hit Xometry hard again as we've slowed down a little bit. Now, granted, we could pick right back up if my customer has anything, if my customer's words are true. But I still want to get Xometry going again, because if I get another machine, the workload that I got from my customer needs to become what I normally get from them, not big orders, but it needs to become a normal order that I expect.
Yeah. I've got a lot of stuff to get caught up on, but I'm gonna at least try to do one job a week. I have a couple jobs right now where I offered to do it for more money than they were offering that they haven't said yes or no to, and I'm hoping one of those comes back. I was listening to Servent Solutions, or I was talking to Servent Solutions. I'm kind of taking their advice, which is to try not to take jobs under $1,000. But the board just isn't showing me stuff for under $1,000, and I think it's just because I don't have much job
You mean
history.
under or over?
Don't take jobs under $1,000.
Yeah, but you said your board isn't showing you anything under 1,000. Are you saying
it's not showing me anything over $1,000?
Yeah.
And when it is, it's 200 parts or something like that.
Yeah. So I will tell you this from experience: you have to get 10 jobs under your belt before the board starts to open up.
Okay. So maybe I should take some quick ones.
Yeah. So Xometry, you're technically in, at least whenever I did it, you're technically in a probationary period until you've either done $15,000 worth of parts or done 10 jobs without issue.
Okay.
And that's how it was whenever I first joined. I don't know what it's like today. I don't know if they still have that policy in place, but whenever I did it, you're kind of in like the beginning is like a probationary period, just so they can get comfortable with you. And then as the more jobs you take, the more the board opens up.
Well, what I can tell you now is I've been refreshing my little slot machine here for probably 2 hours, and I haven't seen a new job.
Okay. Well, let me tell you what my end's like. On my end, I see basically 40 jobs all the time. As I cancel them out, it backfills back up to 40 instantly.
Okay. That would be really nice.
And so I almost always see 40 jobs on my board, and that's where it starts to taper off and kind of lock out. And as I cancel jobs off my board, it'll crawl back up to 40, or as I cancel it out, I could cancel out 10 jobs and then I look at my total and it dropped from 40 to 38. And
Yeah.
then I cancel out another 10 jobs and it drops down from 38 to 36. And so even though I'm getting rid of like 20 jobs at a time, it's backfilling them not all the way back up to the 40. Like it'll never go like as I cancel jobs, it'll never go all the way back up to the full 40 again, but it'll backfill up to 80% of what it was, or 90% of what it was as I can. And so it's kind of like it's got this buffer zone it can grow to, but whenever a buffer zone is a certain size, there's X percentage behind that that's still, it won't show me until I've either marked them off or accepted or made counter offers.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's comforting to know because yeah, it's been empty for a while, and but I have been rejecting jobs as they come in that I don't want to do, and maybe I need to be a little bit less picky. I almost took one
Yeah.
like
I,
right before.
I was going to say, the only thing I would say is be very picky on your first 10 jobs and make sure you can get 100% quality on them, because those 10 jobs are what'll determine how well they open up the board afterwards. So that is one thing. Whenever I remember at the very beginning and I was talking to my Xometry rep, he said, make sure you take jobs, but also make sure that whatever job you take you can do, because the first 10 jobs are criticized far greater than all your other jobs after that.
I take that as a given. Yes, I won't do. I won't take a
In
job that I can't
fact,
do well.
I think your first 10 jobs, especially for you in the beginning, all of your jobs, all of your items on your board, I think have a 1 day or a 1 week reduction in the
Oh,
time that's
really?
actually available for them. Because I'm pretty sure that in the beginning, all your jobs, your first 10 jobs, all go to Xometry where they inspect them with a CMM.
I know my first one did.
Yeah. I think because you don't have Xometry packaging yet, do you?
No, I'm kind of
Yes.
worried they sent it to my old house, but that's a different story.
I don't think you'll get that until you've got exited your probationary
Oh,
period.
interesting.
And so in the beginning, your jobs will have you'll have less jobs, you'll have less lead time, and all of your jobs that you accept are going to go to Xometry for full inspection and ship out to the customer. And so only after you get through your probationary period will they send you everything you need to pack up and ship direct to customer, and your lead times will grow and the amount of parts on your board will grow.
So that's why all these jobs only have like 5 day or 3 day leads.
Yes. It's
Okay.
it's not that's the actual lead time. That's the lead time they need to get them done in so they can make it to Xometry for them to fully inspect them. If there is a problem, they have time to remake it and then ship it to their customer. And so pretty much everything on the board for you in the beginning, like I said, for your first 10 jobs is going to be like hit and run, hit and run, hit and run. And so finding the easiest, cheapest jobs almost is a way to game the system a little bit, just to get through those. And then the board will open up and then you'll get all the materials you need and go from there. That's been my experience. And that's kind of what I gathered talking to different people back in the day.
So I wonder if I should take like one or two of these then that I said I would take for more money. Because there's one where the material costs are pretty negligible, and that might be a good one to take. Oh,
I,
there's
I,
another one where I have to buy a bunch of tooling, but
I would say anything where in the beginning, anything where your material costs and your tooling costs are pretty cheap in the grand scheme of the job, even if it's going to take a lot of time and you're not going to make a whole lot of money from a time perspective, but it's a low risk in terms of money going out to get the job done, is probably worth it.
okay. Well, I may reconsider some of those then. Yeah,
Just at
because
least
there's
in,
one where I have the tooling. Materials are going to be $50, and then it's a $300 part,
yeah,
or well, it's several parts, so a total of $300. But
yeah. So in the beginning, you're going to have a period that you have to wade through before the board really starts to open up.
okay, that's good to know.
And your lead times are tight, your expenses are tight, and everything's going to be fully inspected by CMM. So keep that in mind. So
There, Man, there was one part that I was going to take today, and I was pricing out materials and tooling, and the job disappeared before I could
Oh
get
yeah,
back to it.
that happens
It's like,
all the
this would
time.
have been a good one. It
It,
was
it is
$28 a material and like a $400 job.
yeah. You almost have to do, and that's one thing that got me really good at quoting was you have to basically gut quote, and you have to be really fast for good jobs. Although I will say, oh, what was I going to say? Shoot, I had a point I was going to make, and I can't remember it now. Oh well, I'll think of it later. But it was for an early job shop. It was a great resource to be able to see what was out there,
Mm-hmm.
and it really built our quality side. Not that we had very many problems, but it forced us to fill out those reports. And in filling out those reports, we figured out that we weren't hitting stuff on size a lot of the time, and so we'd be remaking parts or dialing in features. And a lot of that's probably just Tormach problems and early machinist all combined into one.
Yeah.
So,
I need to figure out wear comp or diameter comp on my machine. It's something I've never used, but now that one, I can measure diameters with that tool setter, and
mhm,
two, like it's actually kind of evident. Like before, the difference in diameter between nominal and the actual tool diameter was like less than the error of my Tormach, so it didn't matter.
mhm,
But now the new machine is dead on repeatable, and I can see like, oh, this end mill is a thou and a half undersized.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It makes a difference. That's something I'm gonna have to start doing too, because I haven't been doing that I haven't been doing that on the mini mill. Everything's been well within spec, so I haven't worried about it. But it makes a difference. What else? Got a lot of stuff going on, but still trucking.
Oh, I moved to the water jet cut blanks for the carabiners.
Oh, sweet. How'd those turn out?
The first run is on the machine right now. It broke a tool I need to replace. It's a 1/16 inch end mill, and it's exactly the same tool path and circumstances that I've been using forever. I think the tool just got worn out. It's one that just breaks every now and then. It has a limited life, but so far so good. The I need to change my order of operations a little bit because I do the slots, including the flexure slot, before I do the finishing pass on the outside of the carabiners. And I have a whole bunch of screws that are holding the carabiners down, but on the very tip bottom of the flexure slot, I'm getting chatter.
Gotcha.
It's nothing that won't Scotch Brite out, but I need to fix that for the future.
That's one thing you'll need to figure out on the Haas side, especially if you start doing products. You actually have tool life now. So,
Ooh, I do built into the control.
yeah.
Yeah,
So you'll need to play around with that. I love it on my lathe side. We track it, even though we we're a job shop, so the numbers don't mean as much as they could in a product setting. It's still nice to know about how many times or about how many uses we can get out of inserts. Although the one thing I will say on the Haas controller side that kind of is annoying, and I'm sure there's a way to do this, I haven't figured it out yet, is I was trying to figure out, and there might be a way to do this. I think there was a way to do it. There was a way I could, but I couldn't get it to alarm out. I think that's what it was. Was tracking the feed time or the time in
yeah.
the cut. I think I could track it on the Haas controller, but I couldn't get it to alarm out once it reached a certain value. The only thing I could get it to alarm out on is if the it had been a certain number of uses, like how many times the tool had been called, not how much time was actually on the cutting edge.
Could you just write a macro at the beginning of your program that's like,
If
hey,
it's
if parameter over this value, then alarm?
potentially, I haven't dug that deep into it yet.
Or actually, instead of an alarm, you could just do a like a pause with a message.
Yeah, the only problem is that I need to check it. I don't want to write all my code with a macro statement in front of every single tool change that says check it, check it, check it, check it, check it.
Just do it once at the beginning of your program.
I could do that.
like in the preamble there.
Yeah.
That way it'd be like, hey, this tool has 97 hours on it, and you said it was good for 95 hours. Like, just so you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I will say though, we did it for this big job that we did. This was a few weeks ago. I used a Kennametal Go drill and I drilled out 1,200 holes in stainless steel, and the drill was fine. Like it still looked
It's
brand new.
impressive.
And so, and our inserts that we were using on that one, I don't think we were getting like 300 to 400 uses before we had to rotate them. And on that one, I think I think we had one insert on one tool in particular that got up to 2,500 uses before it wore out, and it was just like we don't normally see that much wear. This is like a very consistent wear,
Yeah.
and so that was kind of cool. We did a run of 1,200 parts. So
I found a new tooling distributor. I had been using quality mill supplies. I never liked them. I wasn't happy with them. And because of that, I actually wasn't using them. But I was talking to Qualichem about coolant because I wanted to switch from 251 to something more titanium appropriate.
mm-hmm.
And so I'm switching to, I think it's 291, which sounds like basically the same coolant, except it's like more lubricanty. Like basically the same chemistry, but it's got some extra lubrication in there, which helps with, titanium and stainless and whatever. But so I was talking to the distributor for Qualichem, and I was looking at their catalog, and they carry Harvey, they carry Helical, they carry Frasia, they carry SGS, which is one of the companies that I was using from Quality Mill Supply, and you can buy it online, and they can do next day shipping.
Ooh,
So
nice.
it's like, oh, you just checked so many boxes for me. Um,
Yeah,
the, the only box they did not check is they sent me like a, hey, here's the normal credit application form so we can make an account. And I sent them my normal, like, here's all my information that I have in a document.
mm-hmm.
And then they just sent me the form again. So I was hoping they would just use my pre-existing standard document to fill out their form, which is why
But
I have
nope.
that thing. But they
Oh
weren't
well.
helpful enough to do that. But anyway, the all of those boxes checked is pretty good.
Did I talk about the coolant that I was thinking about switching to?
No, I don't think so. Not today, at least.
Not today. So we did the Haas demo day at the beginning of October, which feels like a year ago, but it was at the beginning of this month. um, and we talked to the Blaser distributor there in Tulsa, and Titans of CNC uses that. I think it's the Synergy 731 or something, and we're using I think it's Vasco 6000. And every Blaser guy that I've talked to about going to that has told me to go with the Vasco 6000, and I can't figure out why. And when I ask them if is it a quality issue, is it a surface finish issue, is there a problem with the coolant, and the only answer I can get out of any of those guys is it's 100% synthetic. And I'm like, is that a bad thing? Is like, what's the story? And I can't get any of them to tell me why they keep recommending the Vasco 6000. And I think after doing a little figuring out on my own, I think I know why. And I think it's only probably because of this area. And it's because if you go dig into the the Synergy coolant, it says it has to be done with RO water. And the Vasco 600 does not care what type of water you use. And so my guess, and this is just a gut check or a gut guess, is that all of the Blaser guys in this area either don't realize that, which I highly doubt, or they have tried to get shops to do the RO water and they've had bad results, and so now they're scared of recommending it because everyone that they've had use it doesn't set up their water supply side correctly and has issues and ends up going to the Vasco 6000 anyways. That's the only thing I can think of.
Have a very limited experience with full synthetic coolants, and it was very, very negative. And so I'm
Okay.
scared of them now. Although I admit that it's not probably the coolant's fault. And that is when I bought my very first Tormach, which was the 1100 PCNC. The guy before me was using a full synthetic coolant. I believe the one that Tormach sold at the time. I think they have since changed their the one that they sell because this one was so awful. It ate every single bit of paint off that machine. That machine was so disgusting, and like all the paint was chipping and peeling, and it was
That's
just
how
nasty.
that's how my Vasco 6000 is doing to my Tormach though.
Mine's spotless. No paint chipping, no bubbling at all with Qualicam.
My half the paint's gone on my Tormach already.
I feel like you should use Qualicam. Like this is a problem with your coolant.
Yes, but I haven't found a quality chem supplier that I can get it in large enough quantities for yet. And the reason I went with the Vasco 600 was because when I got the Haas, they gave it to me for free. So
I mean, that's a valid reason, but
I've been using that up. I still have a little bit of it left, and then I'm going to try a different coolant. So
did it
that's
eat your Haas paint?
no,
Okay, that's good at least.
no. It hasn't hurt the Haas at all. It hasn't touched anything on the Haas. But to be fair, I think the Tormach, the only reason it's eating the paint is just because it's only eating it where the chips are accumulating. And so I think it's a combination of a wear, it's getting scratches, and then the coolant's getting underneath the paint issue. Because the Haas, also to be fair, is basically full stainless everywhere that chips are hitting. And so the only place that chips are hitting that could have paint that would wear would be on the casting below it and on the door. And I can't see the inside of the door without poking my head around, so I don't know what it looks like. But the castings below the spindle is untouched. It's fine. So, and the Tormach, the paint is peeling basically where all the chips will build up over time. It's not like it's like the back of the machine, the white part, the sticker came off, but other than that, it hasn't like chipped or done anything to the paint there. So like all of the side panelings that are vertical, it hasn't touched any of the paint on that. Only on the horizontal surfaces where the chips are rubbing.
Well, my paint's spotless, so I
Yes,
don't know.
but you
This would
you
be a big turnoff for me in a coolant. Like it's supposed to protect the machine. It's like its
okay.
number two job.
How often do you empty your chip tray?
Touche.
Okay. Okay. I've emptied my chip tray full of stainless about once every 3 to 4 days, to a point where it's overflowing. That's a
That's
volume of chips.
valid.
That's a volume of chips that's exponentially different.
Are our machines the same age? Is
I
yours a little
got
bit older?
mine in 2020.
I don't remember when I got mine. Yours might be a year older too.
I got mine in November of 2020. So it's going on 3 years old.
I think I got mine in 2021. Do you know what's wild? I was looking back at Instagram posts. I had my Pocket NC in 2020, and
Mm-hmm.
now I have a Haas. I sometimes I forget how fast like I've been going through these machines.
Yeah, yeah. I remember I know we had our machine before you had yours because you were making the trays on your PCNC
Yep.
when we got our machine. Actually, we had our machine for a little bit when you started doing that, and I reached out to you a couple of times just to ask you some questions because you had been machining on the PCNC for a little while, and I think I was trying to figure out some speeds and feeds stuff, and you were hogging out those big aluminum trays about the time I started prototyping with the aluminum playing card cases. And I was theorizing that you had more torque,
I did.
and
About double.
you could actually hog and get a higher MRR than I could Although at the time when I was doing that, I was doing everything at 10,000 RPM. I ended up lowering my RPMs down to 6,000, and I gained a lot more. I doubled my MRR that I could remove, the amount of material I could remove in aluminum, just by dropping it down to 6,000, which probably also saved my spindle in the long run,
Yeah.
knowing what we know now. But yeah, in the beginning, I ran everything at 10,000 in aluminum.
It's
So
kind of mind blowing to me that the machine I bought, which like yes, it's a Haas, but it is the teeniest, tiniest, smallest little Haas, except their desktop mill that you
mm-hmm.
can possibly find. And at at 30k RPM, I have twice the torque that the Tormach has at 10k RPM.
Yeah,
It's just wild to me.
that's insane.
Yeah, and it uses less power. The Tormach calls for 30 amps. This machine calls for 20 amps.
To be fair, I have put a amp reader on it.
It
At
probably uses like 6.
My air compressor uses more
Yeah.
than my Tormach does. Like when we got the Haas machine, power was a big concern. And so we did a power study on the building, on the Haas machine, on the Tormach, and on the air compressor, trying to figure out if we would have enough power. The house with the heater on, the oven running, the microwave running, the washer and dryer running, and I think this all the stovetops on. With everything turned on in the house was pulling, I want to say 40 to 50 amps. It was like
Okay.
nothing.
Nothing. Yeah.
The Tormach on full cut, I was taking an aluminum cut where the spindle was bogging down at full load. I think it peaked at between 12 to 15 amps,
I'm surprised it got that high.
and it hovered under 10
Yeah.
most of the time. But I could get it to basically stall out and touch 15 amps. And the the air compressor ran at like 15 to 20 amps, and the Haas ran at single phase. It ran at, because everything that I've been talking about so far has been single phase power. Single phase power, it was pulling like 70 to 80 amps. Three phase power is pulling about 40.
Yeah. I have my, I just, this is my breaker panel. I have my air compressor on a 30 amp circuit. The Tormach's on a 30 amp circuit. The Haas is on a 20 amp circuit,
Yeah, my
which was nice because I got to go down a wire size.
my Tormach's is on a 20 amp.
Yeah. I think mine would have been absolutely fine. I
So
actually think I oversized my wire too. So my Tormach might, like the wiring, I think can do 50 amps, but we have a 30 amp breaker on it.
yeah, yeah. My Tormach is on a 20 amp breaker, and I think the air compressor is also on a 20 amp breaker. Um, and then the Haas, I think, is on a 80 or 90 amp breaker, something like that. So
The smaller breaker was one of the reasons I decided to go with the OM instead of the Sile, because the Sile needed like 60 amps or something after you worked in the phase converter. Because like the machine
mhm.
used more power, then you need a phase converter, and the phase converter is wasteful and uses a bunch of power, and then like all of a sudden you're spending $2,000 just to get the machine hooked up.
Mhm.
Whereas with the Haas, I mean, it was an afternoon with my dad and like I don't know, $50 a wire or something.
Okay, so it is the single phase machine as well.
Yes, it's single phase.
That's nice.
Yep. And you
I
can pallet
assumed
jack it.
it was, but I've never actually officially checked. So, but I'm glad my assumption was correct on that. I figured with the mini mill and the TMs being single phase that the OM would also be single,
Yep.
but that's cool. What's your tool change time on that?
Fast. I run it at 5% rapids 90% of the time, so it feels a little bit slower, but I mean, it's probably 5 or 10 seconds or something less.
I have found, and I don't know. I want to say some of this could be because I rebuilt the spindle on my machine because it's not as loose as it was the factory one. But a tool change on my Tormach takes over 20 seconds.
Oh, at least. Yeah. I
It
know I know with the tool breakage detection and the normal probe settings, a tool change was like a minute and a half chip to chip.
Yeah, it's stupid.
Or no, that was with the slower probe settings. Excuse me, where I had to slow them down for the Trutronics probe. If it's faster, it's less than a minute, I think, but not much less. Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, so I have started trying to eliminate tool changes as much as I can because that's the only way I can speed up my programs at this point. And so, like, one of the things that I've started doing is if I can face a part with an end mill in under a minute, it's going to be faster than switching to a face mill.
Yeah, I almost never used my face mill in my Tormach.
And
Only when I
so,
wanted better finishes.
yeah, and so that's the only time. And in stainless, it's not worth it at all. I don't think. Like I've been doing it, and it works if I can do stuff in a single pass. But at this point, I feel like just doing it with an end mill is makes so much more sense. It's one of those things where it's like, oh, I'm a big boy with a big face mill, but it's just like no. It when you do a time study and you figure everything into it,
Well, and facing actually with a smaller tool actually gets you a flatter part.
yeah.
Maybe not an improved surface finish, but overall flatness is better.
Well, in a Tormach for sure. In a bigger machine, I don't know. Just because, like, yes, it reduces your tram error. Like, I understand it from that perspective. But the Tormach, especially, I don't feel like I have a tram issue until I go up to a face mill, and then it feels like the whole machine kind of tilts, and I start having tram issues. But as soon as I go over to a regular face mill, they either disappear or they're not present. Like I can't notice them because they're so small, or there's not enough tool pressure to actually cause them to show up in the first place.
Yeah, which is very possible.
So, regardless, I've been making absolutely amazing parts. So, anyone who listens on this podcast and is ever wondering if they should get a Tormach, I would say if you can get a good deal on one, they're not as bad a machine as people have said, as long as you understand their limitations and understand what your use case is for them. They make absolutely amazing parts when you have all your processes dialed in. The parts I have been able to produce have built the company that I started, have been built off of that Tormach, 90% of them.
My theory on Tormach is still if you are learning CNC from the ground up, you do not want to jump to a Haas before learning a Tormach.
Yeah.
If you already like have a job where you're working on Haas's or Fanuc controllers or whatever, then by all means skip it and go straight to a Haas. But
Yeah.
even if it is less value than something like a TMOP, I think the learning and the amount of pain and struggling that it'll save you is worth the penny. And Tormach's resale for like 75% of their value, at least. So
Yeah. I haven't tried that yet. I'm planning on hanging on to mine for quite a while, but we'll see. I have been pleasantly surprised, and anyone who makes an argument about this machine can't cut that material, I just laugh at this point. like, like that's just a joke. Anyone who says that is talking out their butt. Any machine can cut any material under the right conditions. I feel like it might be the slowest thing you've ever seen, but it 110% can be done. I mean, yeah,
especially if you have some cheeky tools to
exactly,
help with your little noodle machines.
exactly.
Ooh, I
It,
got the next batch of samples in. I made some design revisions to the tools,
mm-hmm.
and they look much better, and I think they'll work better.
Yeah,
I also got some super long reach ones and some ball mill versions.
nice.
So I'm excited to use an 1/8 inch tool like 2 inches down. See how that
It
works. It actually
should
might be a
work.
good way of simulating a nomad.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It should work great. The tool that I've used the most here recently has been a 330 seconds long reach stubby end mill from Harvey Tools, because I've gotten a ton of parts from my customer that have a slot cut in them that's just about 3/16 inch wide and are about 3/4 of an inch deep.
3/16 or 3/32.
Sorry, 3/32
Yeah,
at three
it's a
quarters of an
very
inch.
different slot.
Yeah, 3/32 at 3/4 of an inch depth. So it's something like 8 times D.
Yeah.
And I have gotten insane tool life out of that tool, and my finishes look amazing. And I broke the first one or two tools, but the third one has just been lasting forever now that I got everything dialed in.
Yeah, I was
And
looking at a zometry part. It's one of them where I was like, "Hey, I'll do this if you give me twice as much money." But it has holes that are 1 millimeter wide, or slots that are 1 millimeter wide and 13 millimeters deep.
oh my goodness.
And they're not like, it's not a very long slot. It's basically just like a hole that's been stretched 2 or 3 times.
Oh my.
And so I was like, you know what? If you want to pay for me to get some really expensive holes, like I've got the RPMs for this, and we'll just pre-drill and then clean them up with the end mill.
Yeah, could you does the slot go all the way through the part? Could you hit it from both
Yes, it's
sides?
blind. I
Is
could. I
it's
would be worried
blind
about.
or
Or
it's
I'm sorry,
through?
it's through. It's the opposite blind. It's sighted.
Okay.
I would be worried about the mismatch, but I can get like I can get the tool. I've got the RPMs. Like, yeah. So what if I take a 1,000 step down?
Yeah. Yeah. With that many RPMs, it speeds up everything drastically for that size.
Ironically, with the exception of titanium.
Oh, really? You
Well,
still
okay. At with a 1 millimeter tool, it would still speed it up, I suppose.
yeah.
But
And
at
it
I know with an at least an eighth inch tool, the like if you go with the 200 SFM cap, like you're still under 10k RPM. So it's not actually that much of a speed up for me.
yeah, but once you jump down anything below an eighth inch, I feel like
Yeah.
you start to speed up quite a bit.
Oh yeah.
Especially when you get into the 1/32 and smaller.
Yeah.
So
Or ball mills where you're not cutting on the diameter of the tool.
oh yeah. Yeah. That'd make a huge difference too.
I need to do a test part with a bunch of surfacing on this machine just to see how pretty I can get it.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, question for you. The the fidget cubes, my Kickstarter I'm working on.
Mm-hmm.
I was planning on running those while I was installing the Haas, but I ran into an issue where the last clamp that is holding like the finished side, like at this point I've finished 5 sides of the cube, I'm doing the 6th side, and I have
Mm-hmm.
no choice but to clamp on finished material.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can't use as aggressive as a clamp. Like my other ones kind of have little teeth that dig into the material.
Mm-hmm.
And I was throwing that part.
Mm-hmm.
And I threw like 2 in a row, and I was like, okay, I'm done. And I just worried about getting the Haas in place and up and running.
Mm-hmm.
If Is there a difference in like tool pressure slash like uplifting force if you are, let's say, cutting half the depth of cut but at like twice the RPM? Do you
That
think
gives
that
you
would have less pulling force?
yes, it'd have less pulling force. So your depth of cut, but if you go twice the speed, you're gonna and instead of pulling it up, you're gonna be pushing your part side to
Laterally.
side. Yeah, and
I'm okay with
so
that.
you got to be careful with that. I just dealt with this because I was doing a plastic part. I got to finish it up in the morning. It was a nylon part, or it is a nylon part that I'm working on, and it has a really thin section and a radiused edge, and so the area I can clamp on is like less than a 30 second
Ooh, yeah. In plastic?
in plastic. And
Oof.
so pull out has been a big issue I've been fighting on that part. And I've just ended up reducing my depth and reducing my feed. I reduced both and until I got to a point where it wasn't pulling it out. And so in my mind, it was like, man, I'm running at like 40% of what theoretically is possible because of my work holding limitations. And in my mind, at least for this part, it's like as long as the part gets done and I'm not remaking parts, it's worth that extra time. Because if that saves me remaking a part and I'm not riding that bleeding edge the whole time of what's considered safe and what I can get away with, it's worth it. And so I would go ahead.
Okay, I was gonna say this just goes back to AJ's unified theory of speeds and feeds, where your speeds and feeds are this Venn diagram where you have one big lobe that is your tool, you have one big lobe that is your material, and then one big lobe that is your machine and your work holding, and you can only cut where those all three overlap. And
Mm-hmm.
like it doesn't matter how good your machine or and your tool and like how easy to cut the material is, but if that work holding is not cooperating, like there's nothing you can do to push it more. And that's the
Yeah.
problem I'm having.
The only exception to that rule that I would say for your case is if you had a and what's the word of this tool that is evading me? It's the
Like a
tools that
down
have
cut
yes, but it's a little different. It's
feed mill.
huh?
Feed mill?
Feed mill? I think so. The ones that kind of have the lobes on the bottom that
Yeah, feed mill.
yeah, where all your forces are directed down.
It's actually not a terrible idea. The normally you only see those in for harder materials.
But
Actually, do you know what I should
they
do?
they they do have them in aluminum. Harvey has them in aluminum because I've looked at them.
Okay.
Or not? Is it Harvey or is it helical? It might be helical.
I so my cheeky tools are basically feed mills. When it really comes down to it, it's almost a single flute feed mill. At least you treat them like feed mills.
You might
I
treat them
should
like
just run it all with my cheeky tools
you
because the
can
single
try
flute
it.
would have less tool pressure.
You can try it. The thing about the feed mills is they have that lobe on the bottom that pushes material down as they're running.
Yeah,
That's what directs. If they're a flat bottom, all your force is still going sideways.
that's true.
You need something that's kind of pushing down as it's cutting, and that's where the high feed mills. That's the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah, when I say feed mills, that's what yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, you're saying feed mill, and I was like, that sounds right, but
It's close.
it's close. Yeah, high feed mills.
I used to use those exclusively for making the first generation of carabiners.
Yeah. Do you like them?
I did. The only problem I had with them is that when titanium super springy, and when you got to the like very bottom, 10th hour whatever of the titanium, those downward forces would push the bottom
Material.
layer of titanium down, and it would make the biggest, ugliest burrs you have ever seen.
Have you thought about running them like 80% and then switching over?
I tried that with bad results, but I did not pursue it very much.
Okay. If you've got a good process, I wouldn't worry about it. But if there's any kind of advantage that can be gained in the long term, it might be worth another experiment.
Yeah, especially back then, I was not finishing both sides of the carabiner, and
Mm-hmm.
now I could probably take care of those burrs with a chamfer tool.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
So I
yeah,
don't know
because
if
I
that gains you anything, but it gives you more options.
not it would have gotten me more when I was still slotting, but now that I'm not slotting the perimeter anymore, there's probably less to be gained.
That's fair.
Yeah. One interesting aspect of not slotting that I didn't think about. So before I was ramping down like in
Mm-hmm.
a spiral all the way around the part. The I did not get streaking from the end mill if the end mill was chipped because basically like as you went down all the different parts of the end mill were touching the part.
Mm-hmm.
Now that I'm just doing the contour pass on the outside, I can see like where my end mill is worn a little bit. So I'm getting I think better finishes except for where there's streaks. And
Yep.
that's just a matter of controlling tool life, but
Yep.
ooh, I should probably add a finisher.
That's one
I
thing that
have
I've started doing in all my stainless is I have a rougher and a
yeah.
finisher.
I have some 5 flue 1/8 inch end mills, and that might work really well here.
Although one piece of advice that I heard that is really good advice is make sure that your rougher. I'm going to see if I can remember this advice correctly. If your rougher gets a chip in it and it's always cutting at the same height, and your finisher comes behind it and it's always cutting at the same height,
It'll wear. Yeah.
it'll wear in that spot and it'll basically copy the chips from your rougher. And so you need to make sure your rougher. I don't remember if it's make sure your rougher has a couple passes at different heights or your finisher, just to even out that wear.
Yeah, the rougher would make more sense because kind of like when I was ramping, you would average out where those the high wear spots are, which would make the wear even on the finisher.
Yeah. Yeah. So, anyways, that's just because I have seen that happen in a couple of cases where I've been running a lot of one part, and I start to develop a worn out spot in my rougher that shows up in my finisher.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's about everything that I got. Yeah, we've reached the end. And at the end is the time where I get to tell everyone that they need to tell everyone that they need to tell everyone else about our podcast. To see how many links down the chain we can go.
You need to not tell someone about the podcast.
Exactly. And if you followed that, you're smarter than us. So
I didn't follow it, yeah, so I don't know what I just told them to do. Oh, if you have a shop that makes physical items, either as a service or a product, and you want to be shouted out on the podcast, tell us and we'll give you a free shout out.
Yeah. And also, I wanted to do a brief mention. All those that have reached out to me and who I've talked to on Instagram, I've appreciated you guys reaching out. It's been great. So this has been Harrison with Precision Ingenuity, signing out with AJ from Design the Everything.